Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're with Varun. It's always fun when I say welcome back and you're with Varun, and I have to explain that once again. There are two Varuns here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Varun. Thanks for having me on.
One of the first times I came across what you were doing was when I spotted some of the pieces that you're putting out on Twitter. And what has always interested me about what you say is that I feel you have a unique perspective, not just on like education and startups, etc. I think it kind of blends from you being a content creator at the core, and everything also kind of resonates from that. I thought I'd start off with saying, what about education for you was something that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah. So, to be honest, education was something accidental. I think this all ties into the core Avalon story, right? So I was actually one of the youngest entrepreneurs in India to have raised early stage VC. I did this I think when I was like 20 or 21 or something like that, right? When I was still in college. To be honest, it was very anxiety ridden back then, right? Because when I ran that company, it's called JobSpy, it was a recruitment platform, right? And we were taking on Naukri. So when I was doing that, there was absolutely no information online. Like, how do I run a company? There was like one, I think Mark Andreessen blog and maybe Paul Graham's old school articles, right? And I was like, beyond that, there's nothing. Especially no one in India is talking about this, right? So I really struggled. I went through, I think, 2 years where, every day I woke up like drenched in sweat because I was like, I don't know what to do. And then, after JobSpy got done, we started Avalon, right? And this time, we didn't raise any capital. Me and Shashank, my co-founder, we went out and we built like an agency, right? We said, hey, we'll write code for people across the world. We'll do ads for people across the world. And we were doing this, and this was great, right? We made a lot of money doing it. But the thing was, I really didn't enjoy running a services company, right? And you've done it as well, right? Like after a while, it's a people thing, right? It's not, you're not excited working on problems. You're working on people and their problems, right? So I really didn't enjoy it. So I think on a whim, I started putting out content on YouTube. So I went on YouTube, I made this channel, I called it Meta Startup. I'm like, I'll teach people how to start up, right? And this is before everyone got in the personal brand thing, right? So I started putting out some content on YouTube on business. And I said, I'm not going to do this the Tai Lopez way. I'm going to do this like tactically. I'm going to tell people like, what's a term sheet, right? How does anti-dilution work, right? How do you raise a seed round? How do you raise a series A round, right? So I really went into the nitty-gritties, pulled out, a whiteboard and started, writing stuff. And also, giving people the odd motivation along the way. I really didn't expect to gain an audience. For me, this was me just journaling, right? In a sense. And I think everyone starts, like the best content creators actually start doing content like that. It's not like, oh, I want to build something and get an audience. It's like, oh, let's see if me being me on social works. So I did that on YouTube for a bit. I did that for, I think, maybe like 6 months, 7 months. And I grew quite fast. So I grew to like 10K, 15K. And then I was like, hey, maybe it's time for me to get actually making this small audience that I have a larger one, right? Like, let me actually understand what these people do. And then I got some advice at saying that you should probably do this on Instagram, right? Because YouTube is a saturated platform, blah, 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 blah. Probably shouldn't have listened to them back then, but I took that advice. I took that advice, went on Instagram, but I did Instagram well, right? I got to like, I think 100K odds followers or something. And then I learned some essential truths, not just about education, but also about the kind of audience I had, right? And the kind of audience that exists in India. I understood what they really want. And I understood the gaps in education, right? And going back all the way to when I started a company, Clueless, it's not the fact that there wasn't content. There was content here and there if I really looked hard, right? It's about, I needed curated content, and I needed a bunch of people like sit down and be like, ye kaise karte hai? Like, how do we do this? Right? How do we figure this out?
Because I think it's very broad based, right? I feel that at that point in time, everybody's talking very like, everything was a punchline, but you weren't getting the stuff in between that really is stuff you need to learn about.
Yeah. And today I have that, right? Like to give you a parallel, like when we raised capital very recently, right? And we raised from a lot of friends of mine in the industry, both content creators as well as like founders, right? So these are founders like I can sit with and I can be like, hey, how do you do this? Like, I'm struggling with this. Please tell me how to fix this. Right? So I figured that network doesn't exist for really young people. And I said, that's my audience. And I said, I'm going to try and like, cure this for my audience. I'm going to try and figure out, first I start with content. Then I realized, hey, actually, not everybody's going to be interested in, the tactical side of business. Some people are pre-business, right? They want to get in. So I was like, shit, I have to build a funnel, right? And every content creator has this sort of funnel, right? That top of the funnel is like just something that has a shot of making it to the trending section, right? And then you gain like an audience there, you gain a subscriber base there, and you pick a certain chunk of your subscriber base and say, hey, I'm going to, actually teach these people. These are serious learners, right? And then you take them on. And we were actually one of the first, except maybe the coding guys, we were one of the first companies in India to offer cohort-based courses, right? And cohort-based courses where not just were we teaching live, but we were also putting people together in the same room. And that led to all sorts of weird stuff, right? Like first few months when we were doing it for the first time, we saw that it's not very easy for people to work with each other online. Like if you put like 4 random people in a group and say, here's an assignment, I can guarantee you, and this is online, huh? I can guarantee you there'll be one guy who just disappears. And the other 3 guys are like pissed. They're like, dude, you brought me into this course. This one guy, you said we're going to have a team. This guy's gone.
Yeah.
Right. So it was a lot of firefighting for the first few weeks. But then what we really started, I would say the cream of the crop were teams that understood the content and actually went out and built stuff together. Simple statement, right? Understood content, went out and built stuff together. You can pull out even one of those chunks, and cohort-based courses don't work out. But then, before we even did the cohort-based courses, me and Shashank started putting out some finance content. Huh? He's my co-founder.
Yeah.
So the challenge we were having, and I'm sure you've also had this, Varun, because you also, are a prolific user of Instagram, Twitter, etc.
Yeah.
Only every post you put out, maybe like 5-6% of your audience will see it.
Correct.
Right? That's the way the algorithm is designed, right? So we said, hey, there's only one way to transcend this algorithm, which is to have real estate on your phone, right? So the average person follows or is subscribed to like 20-30 channels.
Yeah.
The average person follows 500 people on Instagram, right? It's a huge number.
Yeah.
So I'm 1 out of 500. So therefore it is valuable for me to be on Twitter because I'm 1 out of 20.
Yeah.
But like, can we make that smaller? So we actually evaluated Slack. We said, hey, what if we went on Slack? We could do our entire gig by ourselves, but it's not 1 out of 20 anymore. Most people will only join our Slack community. So it's 1 out of 1. It's a great place to be.
Yeah. I've actually done a course on Slack. So I'll maybe pipe in on that one once you're done, because I thought that was an interesting experience.
Yeah. But we found Slack boring. Slack was great, but it was boring. Like it was just like this old man thing, right? No offense, but
no, that's why I said it's interesting, because I did this course. Scott Galloway has this thing called Section 4, right? I did his strategy sprint way back in July last year. 1,000 people in the batch, about 100 people per channel, which you were put on. It felt interesting, but it felt like it lacked one core ingredient, which was that you're trying to put people together in groups, but you were almost asking them to figure out a way to speak to each other, not necessarily facilitating it. The facilitation was literally, okay, these are the 4 points people spoke about that are highlights of the day, and a TA would put that out. But we never got, okay, these are like a bunch of people who might actually, you should jam together to put this together. Never happened. It was just slightly more broad-based, which is why I felt it lacked that. I think you summarized it well by calling it boring, but I think that's really the feeling I got as well at some point.
Yeah. So we did Slack and we said, hey, let's do Discord, because Discord has voice rooms to solve exactly the same problem that you put out, right? Which is, how do you get people to organically engage with each other, right? So on Discord, you have voice rooms. Like it's literally the OG Clubhouse, right? So you have these, and we literally made like channels. We said, okay, design, sales, marketing, whatever you're interested in, just jump on the voice channel, idle there, right? And those were express instructions, just idle there, wait for other people to come, have conversation about something. And then we ended up having gaming rooms, design rooms, coding rooms, people who teach each other live. And that was the main use case, right? And this is something that we learned early, which I think now the world is learning. If you can teach somebody else, you can grow an audience.
Yeah.
So everyone there on that Discord was like building their own mini audiences. So we said, hey, this stuff works, right? Until we hit like the 10K mark, right? Because once you hit that sort of scale, then it's like noise, trolls.
Yeah.
It's like you'll have an intense conversation on chat, maybe one clown who comes in and types hi. So we're like, hey, this is starting to get
I
unmanageable.
hate those. That is my worst kind of character. It's not just hi in the chat. It's just that hi. Anybody who just says hi and doesn't say anything beyond that, for me, that's like the worst kind of characters.
Yeah, there's some people who come and type hi and then be like, hey, dude. And then they'll type hi again and then it'll disappear. Like it's a too high. And then, and we've seen it many times, right? So we had that challenge, right? But the bright side, despite all those challenges and leaky buckets, like we do events, like to run a community, you need to keep people really engaged. You need to like you said, facilitate stuff, right? Like do events every evening. Say today we're going to talk about how to perfect your English, right? Today we're going to talk about design and the career options for design, right? So you put out those posters and stuff, but it's very like we make a channel, we put out those posters, we'll hope people just see that, right? So it's very unorganized, but either way, we actually managed to do cohort-based courses on the same Discord. Did a fantastic job, but then realized this is a services business again.
Yeah,
I'd basically reinvented the old Avalon, which is, hey, back then we were selling coders, we were selling growth guys. Today we're selling ourselves, right? There's no point. Like I'm a believer of this, right? I'm a tech guy. I grew up like when I was 13, I started writing code, right? So for me, and at 13, I wanted to build games. So for me, I want to do things by myself, and I like building stuff, and I want people to use that stuff. Like it's a very simple funda. What I do not like doing is managing people. So the minute we started expanding beyond ourselves on the cohort-based courses, right? I think we did 12 in total. We started seeing all the same issues you get when you manage people. So we'll get an external mentor. We'll be like, hey, you do X number of classes. You have a cohort. We'll give you TAs, etc. The community part was sorted because the TAs would manage that. But the actual classes, some mentors would disappear. And companies like Unacademy, who've gone all into this, they actually have mechanisms, right? Like if there's a class and the teacher isn't in the frame, they have like an algorithm running to figure out, is this person in the frame? If he's not in the frame, then that guy gets penalized for the class, right? So we were like, either we go that route and really be, the Infosys of CBCs, or we just say, hey, let's play at the platform layer. Let's give every creator the opportunity to do this by themselves. We'll give them the tools to solve the same problems we had with Discord, which is, how do you have events going on? How do you prevent one guy from typing hi in the middle? Stuff like that. And we will stay at the background. So sort of like more like a consumer SaaS sort of model, except we'll go the Discord route and just give it away for free, right? And we'll figure out monetization a little later, because there's a proven rule that I've seen in my career. You get engagement, you get a lot of engagement, you can always get a lot of monetization, right? And I think creators are the epitome of this.
You hit on a very important point, right? And I feel that we miss that, is that how education was always designed was that I will teach you something, you don't have an option, so you have to listen and you take notes and you give an exam. Literally, I think that's how it was. That's not how it should be. That's how it's largely been. And that's because they never went with it with an experience route, right? You're not creating an experience for the person who's receiving the education or receiving thing. And this content creator mindset is what's kind of changed this thing around. And I started this whole thing off by asking about education, because I feel that the more content has been created across all platforms now, this is a large set of people who are just educating. We're just setting out stuff which you can learn from, and that's growing more and more and more. And it's almost setting a parameter for someone saying that, okay, if I can learn like this on YouTube, if I can learn like this somewhere else, why can't I learn like this in the classroom? Because I think even the fact that people can jam together is something I've seen people do across the board on other platforms, right? So when you're kind of channelizing all of that, what did you learn about the audience that help you kind of set some of the benchmarks? Okay, this is what works for the person who wants to be educated, for lack of a better term, for the consumer? And also, like, what will really work for people who are, I'm just going to keep saying educated, but yeah.
Got it. So you spoke about a keyword experience, right? And I'll tell you how we think about it internally. So Airbnb, I remember a long time ago, Reid Hoffman, who was, I think, either an investor in Airbnb, or I think he was doing Greylock, and Greylock put money in Airbnb, something like that, right? So I remember they were talking to Tim Ferriss, right? And Reid Hoffman was actually explaining Airbnb to Tim Ferriss on a podcast. And he was telling Tim Ferriss, think about this, right? What's a 5 on 10 travel experience? Let's grade it. Let's actually have a scale of 10, right? Like, what's a 5 on 10 travel experience? Okay. You book a hotel, let's say a hotel experience, right? Let's not say travel. Well, you book a hotel, you reach there in the night, and somebody at the reception gives you keys. You go, open the door, you close it. Okay, fine. Everything's there, fans there. You lie down, you sleep. Cool. What's a 6 on 10 travel experience? You come in, everything's the same, but there's an air conditioning. Right? So you feel better. Like, it's the same thing. You're still getting a room, you're still sleeping 8 hours, but you feel a little better. What's a 7 on 10 experience? You come in, there's an AC. Now the receptionist comes to your room and gives you like a bunch of flowers, right? She gives you a laundry bag. Like it starts transitioning into a 5-star hotel. Now what's an 8 on 10 experience? You come there, you're in the hotel. The fridge is stocked, right? It's got everything you like, right? And you probably have to give your like whatever, and then your set of likes, and then there's a placard on the table saying thank you for staying at our hotel, etc., etc. What's a 9 on 10 experience? You come there, and not only is all of this done, you also, like, the host or the restaurant is also booked like 5 different visits for you over the day. Like, okay, 12 to 1, we've already pre-booked this darshan for you. Like 1 to 2, we've already booked skiing for you, right? Stuff like that. So they've done their homework. And what's a 10 on 10 experience? You start personalizing it even more. Like, what are you interested in? Like, instead of me giving you a skiing resort, right, or sending you to a skiing experience, maybe you're a gamer and you really like having a computer in the room. So I give you a computer in the room with your favorite games installed. And you're like, dude, because it's all about how many times you go, dude, this is awesome, right? And then you can actually transcend that, right? What's 11 on 10 experience? I send you to space, right? So you keep topping yourself over what you, and I think all institutions start at a 1 on 10 and then make their way over to 11, 12, 10, and that becomes your new 10 on 10, right? So I would say you translate the same to education. What's a 5 on 10 experience? You sit in a room, you listen, some teachers saying, hey, study this, you take notes, you write exam, done, right? What's a 10 on 10 experience in education, right? You come in and it seems very akin to you playing a football game, right? And football games can't be played alone. Like a game of football, if you really want to enjoy it, you can't play it alone, right? You can't run around with the ball by yourself. Like, you'll get bored very quickly. And that's what like a 5 on 10 experience in education is, right? You're doing it alone. But in football, I put you in a team of 5. I'm like, there is competition. There's another set of 5 people there. And I give you jerseys. I'm like, you're part of team A. That person's part of team B, right? And you guys are going to battle. There's a cup. Today's training. You go through training for 6 weeks. And we give you like, and basically you can keep adding on top of it, right? You just think in terms of what would delight you. And that's why, in a sense, you have to also be the target audience. Like, college failed me. So I am the target audience, right?
So I'm on that. I'm in that group as well. Weirdly enough, postgrad didn't fail me, but grad definitely failed me.
Yeah. So you can actually write down, no, Varun? You could say, okay, these are the 5 things that I wish would just make it, would be less of a college experience, would be more like a tourist experience where I also learn something, right? So if you're paying like 2-3 lakhs for college, or maybe even more, like for more expensive ones, you're actually sitting down. I mean, you're still getting a 5 on 10 experience, except, well, it's a bigger building, right? But as we've figured out, bigger buildings don't make you go do it all the time.
Not at all.
So that's what we thought, and we realized, hey, the element of competitiveness is important. So we actually created houses, right? In our Discord, we actually had House of Odin, House of Zeus, House of Izanagi. It's like 4 houses, right? And we
gamified it.
Yeah, we gamified the crap out of it, right? And when people did the pro leagues, we actually sent them, we call these pro leagues, the paid cohort-based courses. We'd actually send them boxes with jerseys, right? Not, I mean, we didn't do go to the whole hog and say competitive jerseys, but like, hey, Avalon jersey, welcome to the, and I know a lot of people in CBCs who also do the same thing. We didn't do it for all, but towards the ending, we started doing it a lot. So we were just trying to top that experience. But here's the conclusion we came to, Varun. I think education is 99% about communities and very little about the content.
Oh yeah.
Very
you
little.
learn so much more from the community. I agree on that.
Exactly, right? If you're if you're going to the gym, Varun, I see some of your Instagram stuff, right? You like going to the gym. If I gave you a bunch of like 30 people to go to the gym with, right, who all were doing their own research, trying to get better, figuring out nutrition, and I plunged you into that, you would enjoy it way more. Obviously, you also sure. There'd also be like these biological feelings of, oh, is this person's bigger than me? This person's smaller than me. This person's probably doing it better than me. This person's improved more than me. All that kicks in, sure, but you'd enjoy it more. You'd be more immersed, right? Sure. So we realized it's all about the community. That's why we actually technically evolved from saying we're an education platform to we're a community platform. Education is one subset of communities, because we feel no matter what community you join, except maybe just the fringe content creator communities, I think it's all about education. Even Twitter is an education community. Like, no, I'm sure like I should post a lot on Twitter, but it's mostly an education community.
I have a feeling like we're just kicking this one off, but I've been told it's time to go in for a break. So if you're going to just do that, and we'll come right back to Advertising is Dead. Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're still Varun. One of the things which you spoke about before we went on to break was and I think that's interesting, is that the more we gamify the experience, the more we make it community based. We don't just tend to learn more from the person teaching, you actually learn from the people you are being taught with. And as you're going to build that out, is that also how scenes came to be? Was that one of the things? Okay, this is something we need to kind of build out to facilitate that, or how do you separate what you were doing at Avalon with Meta and then moving towards this?
Yeah, so it was exactly the same thing, right? We learned that no matter how much money we make, it's still me sitting there, Shashank sitting there for an hour a day, doing our stuff, teaching students. And then when we expanded beyond me, Shashank, Abhinav, who's my third co-founder, it's now people management. It's like a services agency, right? There's no value of tech, and the only place we're really putting in effort is doing that community facilitation, which I think is the most critical part. You can literally, and this is, I think, one of the edtech platforms does this. I don't remember, one of the big ones. Great Learning, one of those, right? They'll give you every Monday, they'll give you like a video feed. They give you prepackaged videos. No one's teaching you live. I think maybe they have 1 or 2 live classes, but they're sending you like a video feed every Monday. Tuesday is an assignment on it. And the rest of the week, you're building a project with your team. And that sort of education model is run more by TAs than a particular creator. Because Varun, there's also another problem with creators. And I'm sure you've seen this, right? And I'm sure other CBC platforms will also realize this, the mavens of the world, right? Creators, especially the large ones, don't need anybody. If they are teaching a CBC, they don't need a platform to go do it and give 10% of their earnings, right? They can just do it themselves. They can just like tomorrow, if you want to do a CBC, you already have an audience. You don't need somebody else, right? Unless my value to you is, okay, I'll give you twice the size of the audience, which most CBC companies don't have, right? They're just like, they're companies, and they can at best provide you TAs, which I think today is, like, you can put up an Instagram post and get like 30 TAs.
That's true.
So we didn't see that we were adding too much value to creators. Creators would not stick with us for more than maybe a year. They didn't want to do a second cohort. And I was speaking to Tanmay Bhatt about this, right, a long time ago. And I was talking about CBCs, and I was like, hey, why don't you do a CBC? He was like, the reason I became a creator is for my freedom. And that resonated with me. I'm like, that's the same thing I believe in. And I'm sure that's the same thing every creator believes in, right? You do it, you're sure money is good, but you value your freedom more. Otherwise, you'd be in a job making like twice the amount of money, right? You don't want to hold yourself responsible to a set of people, much less one boss. Like, one boss is hard, 30 bosses, 100 bosses, even more difficult, right? So we learned that, and we said, then maybe it's preferable for us to facilitate all this via platform. So if creators want to do it themselves, because it's not like creators don't want to do this, it's just they don't want to do this for somebody else. Like if they were to do this, they do this by themselves. So
also ownership, right? I think freedom and ownership in some ways, because I feel creators really enjoy customizing it to how they do things, and I feel the constraints really make them feel like, oh man, it feels like a job, and I do a job and I'm a creator together, so I totally know the when you see the freedom aspect, how that kind of chimes in.
Of course, right? So we learned that it's, I mean, this is my learning over the last decade, right? If something is at odds with biology, it will just not fly. You put a lot of effort and make it work for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Yeah. After that, it just breaks, right? It starts like pulling away from from itself, like it implodes, so to say, right? And we figured out that if we were to build a platform that tries to make creators do something they don't want to do, your retention is going to be only so much. Yeah. Right. So like, this is not a long-term thing. So I said, but there's still creators doing it by themselves. Let's start building the ultimate CVC platform. So here's how we thought of doing it, right? Yeah. Like we still need to replicate that Discord, jump on voice rooms, funda. So it actually since predates Clubhouse, right? In terms of when we started building it. And when Clubhouse became popular, it sort of just validated our hypothesis. We're like, hey, this works, right? Yeah. It's just that I feel if we were maybe say 6 months earlier to do this, we would have been somewhere else, right? In terms of we could have taken over the world doing just the audio bit. But our goal was never to do the audio bit because we had to still build out the rest of Discord, which we still are, right? So it's chat, right? And then with chat, you have the same issues of hi, someone putting in hi there. So I said, okay, we need the availability. We need to allow people to add new type, like Discord allows you 4 types of channels: announcements, chat, stage, which is the Clubhouse clone, and voice. So we said, what if we took that hypothesis and added more types of consumer social interactions? What about forums? Like what if some creator or some community or some, educational cohort wanted to have a forum there, right? Because forums solve the high problem because all your conversations are threaded. Yeah. You have context, you know what's going on. Like at the end of the day, you can just say sort by top, right? Whereas on Slack or Discord, you see some conversation going on, you have to scroll up till like, you don't know where it started, right? And you have all these interspersed highs in between. So we said, what if we allow people to create unlimited forums? Well, while we're on that, why don't we allow people to create a shop? Well, while we're on that funda, why don't we allow people to, create a calendar? Right, which is what we struggled with. Remember, we used to put posters and nobody knew when the event was going on. Yeah. Right. So in our events channel, we put a poster and we'll hope people remember, which is silly, right? On Discord. Yeah. So in a sense, we were just scratching our own itch, right? We're just building the ultimate community platform for ourselves. This will definitely work for cohort-based courses. But then one thing we started realizing was that people would also, like when we were showing the demos to some, especially D2C companies, they're like, for example, all the top D2C companies, even the funded companies are now all building communities. Scalar Academy started building a community, FamPay, like deep into community. So like, hey, it might work for everyone. Why should we relegate ourselves to just CVCs? Right. But the thing is, our thesis is that the ultimate CVC platform will also work for everybody else, because if you want to grow a community and grow an audience, you need to teach. Yeah. Right. This is something we started off with. Yeah. Right? So all communities have also learned this. Pretty much everyone on social has learned this. Right. And we just said we're facilitating it. It's off, an Instagram / whatever. The scenes, we built out the most complex part first, which is the audio type of channel. In fact, next week, in fact, we built audio channel and we built the calendar channel. And next week, the forum channel goes live, right? So you're going to, instead of like, some people see us as a Clubhouse because we're very, very young, right? We just built out the first channel first because that's the hardest part, because you have like thousands of people concurrently live. So you're essentially recreating a Zoom, right? Without the video. So we had to just, we built that out, and now we're building out the rest of the infra. My only concern is at which point is it too complex, right? So I'm always balancing complexity.
So the problem Discord actually faces, right, is that it feels too complex for many people to understand.
Yeah. And I think that's also a function of the founder market fit, right? The founders of Discord are gamers. They're hardcore gamers. Yeah. And me as a gamer would enjoy Discord, but you need to make things seedha. Like you need to make things very simple, right? Like Clubhouse. Just brain dead.
I was just watching their new television spot with Danny DeVito, and I'm like, again, it's gone back. It starts off with gaming. So by the time you come to music, students, everything else, it's a little later.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's really the confusion a lot of people have who aren't necessarily hardcore gamers. Even casual ones I know that takes some time to kind of get into Discord and understanding how it works.
Yeah. And I think one thing people have asked us about Discord is, well, why won't Discord end up adding a forum channel or the other 10 types of channels that we've come up with, right? And we're just like, they will piss off their core audience.
Yeah.
Their core audience is gamers, right? Discord, unfortunately, it's like you get shackled, right, by your audience. Like, to give you an example, I made a video very recent, like a stupid video on YouTube, right? I was just testing stuff out. My original audience was like, what are you doing? Right? Why did you do this? So you kind of get shackled, right, by your existing, like your first 1 million people on Discord have shackled them to the gamer community, which is why Discord is actually in their plans. They were actually planning to go and sell games like Steam. They're planning to compete with Steam. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, there's so much opportunity in front of you. You can literally be the next Facebook and you're going and battling Steam. But I think Discord's pivoted. Now they're going back into communities, and their entire like thesis, if you've seen their Facebook ads, the last few Facebook ads, they're like, Discord is a place for you to find and meet your communities. Right. And we're like, that's a good one. But yeah, that's the battle we're taking.
So when you look at it from a broad-based piece, what have you actually learned? I know you've spoken about the people creating it, but what I'd love to dig into is saying, how do you see this space evolve? If you're looking at it, not just from how is education going to involve, but more than how you even interact with it as a consumer, and what you kind of learn from consumers in that sense. But also when you look at it from the sense that, is this going to fundamentally alter what is traditional forms of learning things? Because a lot of them have had to, like I've spent a year in nursery with my daughter on an iPad. So I totally relate to what was good and what was bad about that experience. Because try to put a bunch of 4-year-olds together on a non-interactive, like it was interactive largely, but also like it wasn't face to face. What do you feel the evolution of this space is going to be as this evolves into being almost the mainstay way of putting information out rather than the traditional way of putting it out?
Gotcha. So Varun, I always feel like if you want to supersede an existing system, which is you want to, destroy an existing system, show a new incarnation of the system, you need to first show implicit futility in a system. Like, I don't know if you're getting this, right? You need to first show that a system is completely useless on a large scale. And that's been always hard to do with education. But then comes along this small, teeny, weeny little virus, and it shows us, it actually creates that scenario, right, where it completely shows you that you can live without what you thought you couldn't live without. Like every parent was like, I can't live without school, right? School is like, I have to send my kids to school. We have to do school. And after COVID, you're like, I mean, even the parents, like, because I've spoken to a lot of parents, right? Even parents, when they walk into their kids' room and they're doing like Zoom classes, they're like, this is stupid. Like, it doesn't make sense. I'm paying so much money for this. Right. So I think that fault tolerance happened, but I think, or that fault was, now everyone sees it, right? Like everyone can see the villain. But I feel like it goes beyond just the pandemic or education. I think the fundamental shift is creators. And it's showing up in all sorts of things, right? So in the 1990s or in the 2000s, you had the internet was a bunch of web pages or web apps created by web developers. Okay. They had total control. But today I feel with no code, with apps like Scenes, with apps like Discord, I see Discord as a type of web browser, right? It's a browser where instead of browsing different things, you're browsing communities. That's why we added things like shops, right? Because we think of Scenes eventually as a browser. It's like a browser into communities, right? Because that's what the internet was. The way to connect people. We're like, okay, now we're not connecting 1:1. We're connecting many to many, right? So we're a type of browser. So we have to, if we provide creators all the tools to create their own version of the internet, you don't need web developers anymore, right? So you're not subservient to another class of human beings. So now that you own this, you can do your own thing, right? And it's reflecting in everything, right? These changes. Firstly, it's reflecting in startups, like startups when they start doing ads. And I know this because I speak to a lot of founders, right? When we start doing ads, the first advice you'll get if you're a founder is don't run ads, go to influencers, right? It starts with advertising is dead, but influencer advertising is not dead, right? Go give them money, they'll get you an actual targeted audience that cares about what you're putting out, right? Rather than just broadly blasting it on Facebook or Instagram. You starts with that. Then it starts with creators making a lot of money, right? And creators realizing, holy shit, everybody wants me. Like if you're a creator and you have even like 20,000 subscribers today, if you really maxed out and you spoke to all the agents, you could easily make 1 crore a year. I'm not even kidding. Like it's so easy for a creator because there's so many new startups. Even the larger companies want you, right? And you're the cheapest form of advertising. So they'll come to you. Then what creators will start realizing is some of these startups are doing really well. And they're not making like 1 crore or 2 crores. They're making hundreds of thousands of crores. I want a piece of that. So they start buying into companies, right? For example, Avalon, we have like 7 or 8 influencers on the cap table, good ones, right? And these same thesis, they're like, hey, this company has a shot of success. Let me invest in it. So we have creators starting to own companies, starting to become investors, and then you realize that the old school investors, right? Let's say the guys who used to put, say, $200K to $1 million in companies, you don't really need them anymore.
Yeah.
Right? What do they offer you? They just branded money. And now there's a surplus there also because all the creators are starting rolling funds in the US. Right? So they're like, creators are pulling in LPs because they have the reach. The minute you have reach, you're done. Right? Because you pull in all the LPs. And for those listening who don't know what LPs are limited partners, right? So you pull in limited partners to put in a little bit of money.
I think maybe explain a rolling fund as well.
A rolling fund is basically a way for a creator to just start a fund without so much of the paperwork that you typically do. Usually when you start a fund, there's an insane amount of paperwork. But a rolling fund, like Sahil, I think is the most famous example of someone running a rolling fund. He used to run Gumroad. I think he still runs
I think he still does.
Gumroad, but he has a lot of reach because he's big on Twitter. And what he's doing is he's putting out fortune cookie style tweets on Twitter because at scale, that's the only thing you can put out, right? And because of that reach, he got access to a lot of LPs. He told them, hey, put in a little bit of money. I'll invest your money in the best startups. I get these startups because these startups not only want my money, they also want my distribution, right? So now he's offering like instead of a 5 on 10 experience, he's offering a 7 on 10 experience to startups. Right? So startups look at him and they say, this is my obvious choice over somebody else who just puts 100K and is a no name, right? And then you see this huge volume of new rolling funds that are created and just general funds that are created that increases the amount of money being thrown in startups. Now, again, startups are putting more money into creators, right? So it's like this circle that's like just growing itself and the rest of the world is just being shut out. No capital is going to the rest of the world. Nothing is going to the rest of the world, right? Even the services now are being tailored more towards the creator economy, right? Even we are technically building for the creator economy. Nobody wants to build like a energy startup that will help improve the life of like some random person, right? So unless like all the creators have the same problem, it's very difficult. Right? So you basically have this sort of circle jerk. I was trying to avoid the word, but you have the circle jerk, which is like just going to the moon, right? And I think you can sprinkle a little bit of crypto on here as well because crypto is exactly the same thing. Here, a creator's influence can directly impact the value of a coin, and there's no regulation there, right? Compared to what you can't do that in the traditional stock market.
Unless you're the biggest content creator on earth, and your name is Elon Musk, and you
unless you're Elon, And I think Elon has problems with the SEC, but he's learned with crypto, you don't have problems.
He really asks for it, doesn't he? So anyway.
So that's what I feel like. There's just this small silo of an economy, and I feel if you're not inside it, you're going to be left out. I was doing an analysis of the Twitter or the YouTube algorithm recently. So YouTube in 2016 they put out a paper, and in 2019 also they put out a paper, right? And they spoke about their algorithm. Their algorithm has 2 parts. One is they have a candidate selection system, and then they have a ranking system. Basically, what they do is they'll take millions of videos, shorten it down to 100 based on your watch history, etc., popularity, and then they rank those based on the thumbnail of the video, right? The click-through rate. So if you look at the first part, which is the candidate system, it works via collaborative filtering, which is Varun watches Tanmay, and Varun also watches Marvel. So the next person who watches Tanmay might also be interested in Marvel. That's collaborative filtering in a nutshell, right? So what we should take out of it, or what I kind of took out of it, is one of the only ways to grow on a saturated platform like YouTube today is to collaborate. because there's a high chance that if you collaborate with a large creator or even a medium-sized creator, then the people who watch his channel might end up watching your channel. And some of the creators that have grown this year, for example, Prakhar and people like him, right, have all grown because they have collaborated with different people. They've done a lot of collabs and they've stolen a bit of the collab audience, right? In a sense. So I feel that's the only way to get into the creator economy as well.
It also shows what Instagram just announced, right? That whole like the post can exist in both creators' feeds.
Yeah.
Is what I thought was a very, very interesting move as a platform, because you're saying, because still the question was who's either you both putting it up, but you're not sharing the engagement and the views and the likes and etc. Now you're sharing it and it exists in both your places, so you're both happy. I thought that's a very, very interesting,
it's insane
piece to come out, because I never thought that would be something they could like that would come up immediately, but I think it's a game changer. It just changes everything.
And it improves that algorithm so much because it really puts collaborative filtering into action, right? Now, if you, for example, you and me do a collab on Instagram, now my audience sees you, your audience sees me. There is this mishmash, and now the system knows that anybody who watches Varun will also want to watch Varun. Right? So it's such a, I mean, I know what they're doing, but YouTube lives on that thesis. They're like, boss, for us, collaborative filtering is the way we pull out these candidates. And beyond that, obviously, it's your thumbnail and stuff, which I think most decent creators will know how to do. So what that means is creators are technically the gatekeep of the system. So your old IITs, IIMs, the brand name, right? The ISBs, they've actually started being replaced by the creators of the world, by the Varun Duggiralas of the world, right? So I feel like we've reinvented education, but nobody's really seeing it from a zoomed out perspective, right? Nobody's seeing it in hand with YouTube or this. Everyone, like even VCs, they see it in sort of isolation, right? They're like, oh, I'm sitting here really far away and I'm seeing that, oh, CACs are increasing. But why are CACs increasing? What's the solution to this? Why do communities work? Why are creators involved in this? Right? There's a very surface level understanding that, oh, if I get a creator and make him teach, I'll make money. Right? But they're not like the layer 2, layer 3, they're not really thinking about that. And I feel like we've just reinvented the IIMs, but they're in the names of people. And it actually goes back. You've read, I'm pretty sure you've read that Homo Deus, right?
Homo Deus, yeah.
Yeah, so Yuval speaks about one thing in the book, which is like in the past, like in the distant past in Egypt, they actually worshipped Sobek. They worshipped Ra, right? And even in the Greek mythology, they used to worship Zeus. It was like names. It's not like entities. And there is a reason for that. It's that humans as creatures, as evolved apes, we only recognize other humans. It's hard for us to recognize institutions, right? And we only had this small blip where we did an institution thing, but now we're getting back to humans, human to human. And that's because of the magic of our mobile phones.
You make a very interesting point, right? Because in many ways, if you're saying I learned X from Y and that Y is someone who is known for this, I feel in today's world that holds so much more value than you being from any university, which even if you are, unless you're like, even if you're the top university, I feel this is now coming to almost equal that in that sense. And almost, I think the mid layer there is actually become universities, then companies which have cult following. Like if you're a Google certified X and Y, I think that's holding so much more value now. But I think what's really coming on top, like you said, is actually individuals teaching you. And if you say I learned from this person, then again, I think that's also why people joined companies. People joined specific companies because they wanted to learn from certain people. But now if you see everybody from a Gary Tran to everybody else becoming a YouTuber, so they're not even doing the company route. They're just saying I'm putting content out there and people can learn from me.
Yeah. No, I think with Apple, Google and stuff, I think in people's brains, what's going on is they're seeing these companies as human beings.
Yeah.
They might not explicitly know what's happening in their brains, but like I've kind of figured out from my own head, I think Apple's a person. Right?
Yeah,
and sort of like in my head, if I really close it, it's like a Steve Jobs-ish white color with the logo.
Everything's pristine. It's got aluminum corners.
Yeah. So I've created a persona it's a little bit human-like, but it's not. It's like a cartoon, right? Like when you watch cartoons, you could, for example, if you watch anime and you're watching Goku, you know who Goku is. You have a personality attached to him, but technically he's a bunch of pixels.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel it's a sort of the same thing, but in a slightly different way. It's like cartoons. Cartoons are not humans, but we still recognize them. I feel
it's
like
like
that's
why
what's happening with big
when
companies.
people ask me why I collect bobbleheads, because I have a problem with collecting bobbleheads and action figures. I'm like, I keep them around. Like literally my desk right now has Rocket Raccoon and The Rock, because I'm like, I relate to what both of those mean as characters, and for me they are not just inanimate objects. I mean, one of them is actually live, but I still call Dwayne Johnson an inanimate object because he is The Rock. But I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think the real creator economy, the WWE sort of figured it out first, right?
Oh man.
They actually, like, Vince McMahon was such a smart guy. He was like, I'm gonna copyright this name that I create for you, The Undertaker. I'm gonna copyright it for you. You can't use it outside without my knowledge or approval.
Yeah.
So and they had these sort of environments where these people in real life, they might be very different, but on stage they're very different. Right. So I feel like they nailed it first, and they were actually able to keep those copyrights of those names, which you can't do in today's age. Like today, as an edtech company, you can't say, oh, you created, you come here, I own your name. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Unless you take the effort on painstakingly building them up by yourself.
But even then, once they grow to that point, you might not be able to.
Yeah, I think John Cena now is going and doing Fast and Furious. The Rock has left. You really can't control them. Once the internet has opened opportunities, very difficult.
Which is what I felt happened with most MCNs. I feel MCNs try to do that with creators, right? That will control a set of creators, and at some point, as the creator become larger, they wanted to kind of build that ecosystem around them.
Yep.
Which even is why your perspective on
even Team 10 in the US.
Oh yeah.
The Jake Paul thing. I don't know if you're familiar
with
it.
Yeah.
They tried the same thing. They were like, hey, we'll get 10 creators, put them in the same house, we'll all grow together. You know what happened? Like after like 2 months, as soon as the creators got big, they're like, I don't need you anymore. Bye.
Yeah. Because creators are smart enough to understand the system and then build it out for themselves. The point you brought up about being browsers almost, right? I feel that's an important one to pick up, because I think one thing a lot of creators grapple with, I know I grapple with that a lot, is that, okay, I'm building these communities on platforms like, let's say, Instagram, YouTube, etc. How can I make it more customized for my audience? And I can monetize them, not even just monetize them for that, I can almost build it out like my own universe. And when you say browser, I feel that makes a lot more sense than saying you're building a platform, because there it's still your bubble to fill up with whatever.
That's why no code has become so big now, right? And no code wouldn't become big if there weren't people who are like, I want to build like a safe zone or my space for my kind of users. But yeah, it's a super point.
I want to ask you something. If I was either a creator or an entrepreneur today, and I was wanting to build something out connected to everything that we've spoken about, so which is pretty much everything, what would your points of advice be? What would you say I need to keep in mind?
First, see, there's something I've learned as well, right? Like in the beginning, it's always about, oh, I'm putting out this valuable content or whatever, right? Eventually, it becomes about your personality. Sorry. It becomes about your personality, right? I think your personality will drive retention, right? In the beginning, yeah, sure. You really liked my post on kittens, but now you're here for Varun Mayya, right? So we've seen that. I mean, I've seen that happen across creators, and even PewDiePie has a long video about this. Why do people stick to creators? Because of their personality period. So I feel like start off by putting value, collaborate like a crazy person, build a personality along the way, and clickbait with your thumbnails. That's it. That's the best sort of advice. And the thing is, I don't know what you will end up doing after 100K, because you'll be a different person and you'll know what to do after you get to 100K. So I think it should be milestone based, just like startups are like round based, where they're like, okay, we'll figure this out after Series A or after Series B. Similarly, you should be like, okay, I'm going to do this to this until 10K, or I'm going to do these set of things till 10K. 10K to 100K, I'm going to do these other set of things. 100K, I'll figure it out.
As we come towards the end of every episode, I ask my guests, basically ask them the same set of questions. I've asked these questions repeatedly, and I always find it interesting to hear what they have to say. Apart from everything that you're building out, what do you spend a lot of time doing? What do you focus on? What do you consume? What's your outside of startup life obsession?
um, this might be funny. It might not fit into traditional answers, but I like building games. Like that's my hobby. I spend a lot of time with the Unreal Engine. I just like fiddle with it sometimes when I'm bored, weekends. I know of one other really large founder, right, who actually makes bicycles during the weekend. But I'm less of a bicycle guy because I think that's the utility. It stops at me and maybe like one other person. With games, especially multiplayer sort of games, many people can play it, right? So I really enjoy making games, video games, not the other style. And
I have
I like
not
reading a
heard this
lot of.
answer ever. It's been many episodes since you've done this. Nobody's given this. I've had gardening come up. I've had stuff people read and watch and do, but building games has never come up. It's this. You would be the first.
Thank you, honored. Some people also call me a nerd,
but you know what? Okay, now this is my point. There was a time when you would call someone a nerd because you weren't kind of put them down. Today, it's the biggest compliment you can give anybody is to call them a nerd. And I feel that's why I don't think people use it as much anymore, do they? I think it's slowly, like, as soon as it doesn't become something you can throw as a sly insult out there, suddenly just fades away. The term has just like disappeared.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, I love building video games. It's just something that I innately enjoy, and I sprinkle a little of that in everything I build. Everything I build will eventually feel like a video game.
What can you put together in an instant?
Right now,
whenever
I can put together Maggie in an instant. Like, takes me 2 minutes, but that's
you've gone from an answer which has never been given to an answer that has been given so many times. You've just literally gone from one end of the tangent to the other bit.
Yeah.
Anything that you've watched, read, or listened to recently that you'd recommend?
I'll tell you. I've read this book, or I'm reading this book called Project Hail Mary. It's a sci-fi book, right? It's like, but it's awesome. I would recommend to people who enjoy sci-fi. I also do a little bit of sci-fi on the side. Like, I do a little bit of sci-fi writing. I wrote this really short book called Space is Fake. I think you can find it on, I don't know where to find it. Probably put a link somewhere else, or you'll have to look for it. Space is Fake is the name. But it's this story about a bunch of people who try to build the world's largest telescope to peer into the deepest corners of space and find something weird. So I like writing sci-fi. But yeah, instant is, I mean, if you're talking about what I'm reading right now, it's like Project Hail Mary.
I'm going to check out both what you've written, because sci-fi is something I should read a lot of. I go back to it from time to time. But something interesting I remember is that I was once having a chat, and this was a while back when he was on the podcast, or I think it was when we were doing a pre-chat. So I was talking to Rana Daggubati, and I said, why don't you have enough sci-fi in India? He said, because you have so much mythology that we have, our source material, like we don't need a Marvel or a DC or any form of science fiction, because we tend to go back to that and convert that into our form of sci-fi. I thought that was an interesting insight about why India has a finite amount of sci-fi and not as much as everywhere else.
Yeah, makes sense. It's a good insight.
And my last question, but for you, I'm going to tweak this one. Why do you think the creator economy will not die? I was going to say education, so I'm going to give you the option of choosing education or creator economy. You can pick one.
No, I'll talk about creator economy. I think because of Lindy. You're familiar with Lindy?
No.
So Lindy is a concept by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, right? In brief, it's like if something's existed for a very, very long time, there's probably a very good reason why it's existed, right? And the good reason here is biology. We've always looked up to leadership figures. We always do it. There's a reason populist governments always, keep coming to power. Humans are built to recognize other humans. We are not built to recognize institutions. There are rare cases, but it's very, very difficult to recognize institutions. And even the best institutions are always first recognized by people. So you first recognize Steve Jobs, and then, you move on to Apple. So I feel like because it's so Lindy and it exists in our nervous system, people will always recognize other people. Institutions will never take the role of human beings.
Thank you so much for doing this, Varun. It's been a fabulous conversation. I would actually do a part two readily on this one at any point of time, because I feel that we dug into many concepts, but I've genuinely enjoyed how you look at the space and how you see it kind of evolving and moving ahead. I know there are a bunch of stuff which I haven't even asked you about, which we should get into at some point of time. But thank you so much for coming on Advertising is Dead.
Thank you, Varun. It'll be an honor to return.
Awesome.
IVM